ELD with Brainstorm MTG, back with some Scholars Legacy action. This was filmed on our Wednesday night Legacy series, and round one I am facing off against Mike. I wasn't sure what he was on. As it turns out, it's actually a red-black Reanimator deck. For those people who've been in Legacy a very long time, they tend to think about Reanimator as a blue-black combo deck with Force of Will and other elements of control, Thoughtseize and the like. But this black-red version has actually become the preferred version. I think a lot of the players who would have liked blue-black have moved towards show and tell, and the sneak and show builds, I should say. And the black-red version has kind of come out as the faster version. It is extremely explosive. It runs cards like Dark Ritual, Unmask, and tries to compress the game into a really small box where you have to deal with very powerful spells early or lose. And here, Manaless Dredge has Chancellor of the Annex in the opener. And I'm actually using Dredge again because when I first purchased this deck, it did not have Chancellor of the Annex. I put up some mixed results with the list, even when I was able to catch the room off guard. And I believe that largely had to do with a lack of Chancellor. I really wanted to give that another go. I felt like it was the type of card that is just extremely important in the deck. And we'll see here that it actually is going to come down, and that will prevent Mike from playing a spell on his first turn without it being countered, or he'll have to pay one. So that can really slow things down quite a bit. Of course, Mike does have some free spells that he could just jam into that. Cards like Chrome Mox or even an Unmask, which is a 2-for-1, but speed is going to be everything here for Mike because Manaless Dredge does have the inevitability in this matchup. The longer the match goes, I do believe Manaless Dredge will be at an advantage, able to create incremental board advantage with Narcomoebas, Prized Amalgams, and of course it does have that combo finish with Dread Return. Manaless Dredge is going to need to be careful not to put Balustrade Spy into the graveyard, as that can easily be reanimated, and that would be a huge problem as it would actually deck Manaless Dredge and just end the game if it's done on Mike's turn, as there's no card left in the graveyard, in the library, during the draw step. Phantasmagorian being returned here, so 3 cards being chosen and discarded, and then it looks like priority actually being held here to go ahead and do that again. So Phantasmagorian activated ability twice. The first one will actually just not do anything, as the Phantasmagorian will be back in the hand after the top trigger resolves. And during the draw step, a really solid Dredge here. We've got the Narcomoeba. That's exactly what you're looking for. And it looks like there's a Prized Amalgam in the graveyard as well. So definitely a solid start here. During the end step, Prized Amalgam can come back. Versus a deck like Black-Red Reanimator, it is useful to be able to put some board pressure on, but you're mostly going to need to find a combo finish. It is going to be a little bit harder to find a way to just beat for 4 a turn if you're not able to Dread Return something spicy. And Mike here now finally makes his land drop into Chrome Mox, so drawing a swamp for turn there. And actually doesn't imprint on Chrome Mox. I believe he was expecting me to remember my trigger for Chancellor. Once I missed that, he would have been free to imprint. So you will not actually ever be able to get 2-for-1 with Chrome Mox there. A Narcomoeba revealed on the second time. So now we have our 3 bodies for Dread Return. And 4 damage is going to come in. Of course, Manaless Dredge, your main game plan, game 1, is going to be to hit Balustrade Spy. And it looks like without a Balustrade Spy in the graveyard, that Chancellor of the Annex, it might just be the target here. It looks like Balustrade Spy is actually stranded in hand. That was not discarded to Phantasmagorian because of the implications. If he does reanimate, then we are in a world of hurt. Animate Dead, of course, works as well. Exhume, I generally have plenty of creatures to choose, so I will not choose Balustrade Spy there. Exhume does get a bit more dangerous for Mike as the game goes on. Golgari Grave Trolls get extremely large as the graveyard fills up. And it looks like Dread Return is going to resolve, responded to with that Entomb to get a Gristlebrand, and then Chancellor of the Annex is actually triggering the Prized Amalgam, who comes right back. Really just a huge addition to the Dredge strategy. Prized Amalgam, they dance in and out of the graveyards so well, working together. Of course, if there are Prized Amalgams in the graveyard, one of them comes back, the new ones come back, and they kind of keep bringing each other back from the dead. And it looks like he drew another land, so Mike not out of it. His deck's still very, very explosive. But that Chancellor of the Annex in play is now going to mean all of his spells cost an additional 1. And he's going to need really just Reanimate. Animate dead, Exhume, none of that's going to work here. It has to be a 1-mana spell. And attempting to use Chromox, but that actually did not have anything imprinted on it, so that is not going to tap 4 mana here. And he's got, does he have it? He does have one. All right, so he had his choice. Of course, attempting Animate first. And Reanimate is coming in. All right, just clearing up exactly how that works when your opponent misses that first trigger. But now we've got Gristlebrand coming in, losing 8 life. And it may have been worth it to draw there. Lifelink for Gristlebrand would have meant that if he blocks during combat, he would not die. It is no longer a triggered ability. For those of us playing back in 6th edition rules, Lifelink used to trigger. As it is now, that happens as combat damage resolves. So it may have been worth it in this tight spot for Mike to actually draw 7 and then discard another creature. Because he's really going to need that 3rd land to put that Animate Dead online. We know he has it in hand. And he's really going to need an Elesh Norn or something else besides Gristlebrand to deal with the inevitability here. Gristlebrand will not be able to do it just all by himself. He can do a lot, but there are a lot of zombies that Manaless Dredge can generate when left unchecked. And it looks like we've got 2 Icarids in the graveyard, which are ready to make their debut. Mike here, really with his back up against the wall, he's been able to reanimate Gristlebrand, which would usually put you in very good shape. Of course, one of the strengths of Black-Red Reanimator is the ability to draw into massive amounts of discard. So between Unmask, Thoughtseize, really whatever discard spells they want to run, they have access to all of the best options in black. I've seen Collective Brutality as well. But that deck really can draw a ton of cards and then translate that into stripping your opponent's hand. And that really doesn't do very much versus Manaless Dredge. So here, instead, Mike is going to fire off a Faithless Looting. And he's going to try and get cards that he already has in hand. So we got another Gristlebrand and an Exhume. All right, so we've got Icarids coming in now. And it does appear at this point that it would have been best for Mike to be drawing some extra cards off of Gristlebrand. If he was able to leave him untapped, he would be able to prevent the Chancellor from swinging and really shut down the entire combat step. Even if I do swing with everything, it still wouldn't be lethal there. as he'd be gaining that 7 life. And from here can put Mike all the way down to just 1 life. And depending on the Dread return situation, this could be pretty bad. And it looks like prior to swinging, going to sacrifice Prized Amalgam. So getting down to 1 is not going to be good enough, it looks like. Looks like some grander designs are being had here. Balustrade Spy in hand, not in the graveyard. So we'll actually see who this Cabal Therapy targets. There is another copy of the card, if need be. And actually targeting Mike here. And I gotta think this line is actually a suboptimal line here. Swinging first would have put Mike down to 1 and prevented him from drawing any possible main deck disruption. I don't see a lot of strength in this line here. And thinking about which spell next here. So looks like Icarid is being sacrificed to Cabal Therapy, targeting myself, and that is going to get Balustrade Spy into the graveyard. It was safe in hand up until this point, preventing any type of reanimation effect on it, which would end the game. And now it's just going to be a matter of Dread returns. And there we go. Zombies are leaving the building, hitting Balustrade Spy. And that's going to get those other Narcomoebas and all of the bridges. Mike, considering drawing 7, not doing so indicates that he does not have any main deck way to stop this. And going to need 2 more Dread returns. 1 for Flame, or actually it looks like there's 2 options. There is Flamekin Zealot, which would, after Dread return, have a ton of zombie buddies to give +1/+1 in haste to. And the other option is hitting Flare of the Hatebound, and then bringing in a Golgari Grave Troll. And that does a ton of damage straight to the face. Let's see which option is chosen. Either one will do. And there it is. Flamekin Zealot. Of course, really the only card in Magic that would have mattered there would have been main deck Fairy Macabre. That would have been a weird one for a deck like black-red Reanimator. That could certainly be a card in their sideboard, but not typically in the main deck. So that's the end of game 1. Mike almost certainly going to have some options, and just going through the deck here, it was all visible to him at the end of the game. Letting him take a look through. It's a fairly new list for Mike to play against, and I found that to be the case throughout the tournament. Actually not on camera for the rest of the tournament, but I can say I was on the draw way more than I should have been. Many of my opponents, having not played against Manaless Dredge, did not know up front that you should be drawing, that you should choose to be on the draw versus Manaless Dredge, as they have nothing to do on their turn 1. There's no way of really getting a card into the graveyard. You don't play any enablers. You actually use your draw step to go up to 8 and then discard at end of turn. So if you pair it up against Manaless Dredge, you definitely want to be on the draw every game. It just gets you a free card. Of course, that does not apply to the standard mana'd Dredge versions that run cards like Faithless Looting, Lion's Eye Diamond, Breakthrough, Those decks you'd probably want to be on the play. It is a very fast deck, and you want to be able to make sure that if you do get a card like Deathrite Shaman, that it is active as soon as possible. During the sideboarding, I'd like to thank Scholars, Kyle, the owner there, really doing a great job supporting the Eternal formats. And we've been having these, of course, weekly Legacy tournaments, but also branching out into monthly tournaments for both Vintage and Legacy. For Manaless Dredge, Force of Wills coming in, as well as a singleton copy of Blightsteel Colossus. Blightsteel does allow for you to be fearless with discarding your Balustrade Spies if they are in the deck. And for this matchup, I believe you definitely want to leave them in. A lot of matchups, the Balustrade Spy part of the combo comes out because you're happy enough to get incremental advantage over time instead of trying to combo out. It allows you to play more effectively around cards like Tormod's Crypt, Nile Spellbomb, Fairy Macabre. Of course, this deck very soft to Rest in Peace, Grafdigger's Cage. There are a bunch of kind of global effects that just completely blank what you're doing. Bridge from Below does give you some amount of relief versus Grafdigger's Cage, but you do have to have the ball rolling beforehand, whereas Rest in Peace is just a complete blowout, as of course is Leyline of the Void. Even Planner Void would be too much for this deck to deal with. Once those cards hit, this deck is dead on arrival. You don't have access to cards like Reverent Silence or Ingoture or Chain of Vapor, anything that a standard Mana Dredge deck could have access to. So that's why you board Force of Wills, to try and stop that from happening in the first place. Of course, probably no more effective card than Leyline of the Void against this deck. Can't be countered, comes down immediately, and it ends the game before it even begins. And Mike finishing shuffling up here. We'll see how he deals, see if we have another Chancellor of the Annex. That really did slow things down quite a bit, though Mike did manage to draw a runner land to hang out in that game, and at least be able to make some meaningful decisions. This is a new setup here. Last week's commentary, I was really not happy with the kind of static and feedback that I was getting from the mic, so picked up a new mic, and let me know what you think. Mess with some audio settings here within OBS, and hopefully this sounds good. And Mike, not happy with that 7, gonna go to 6. Of course, the black-red version does not have as much card selection as the older blue-black versions. No Brainstorm, most notably, but it does have Faithless Looting, so you can hope to draw into it. But I think Faithless Looting, when played most effectively, is definitely discarding a creature that you want to reanimate. When playing it just as card selection, trying to dig through the deck, it's desperate times, and it is not as effective as it could be. Certainly a little bit more forgiving than the old Careful Study builds, where you can only fire off the card once. Faithless Looting does allow for the flashback, so worst case, you can try and build a mana base and try and get to that point. But black-red is supposed to be far faster than that. All right, we'll see if Mike, I believe he's actually going to be on the play here. And he has a Chancellor this time. Not typically as powerful versus Manaless Dredge. The cards that Manaless Dredge is playing are sometimes just throwaways, like Cabal Therapy. Very often in this type of matchup is just to generate some zombie tokens certainly a welcome card in his hand. If he can get it onto the battlefield, that will be a hard lock versus Manaless Dredge. I will not be able to play any of my spells effectively. And it looks like he has. And that is what we're talking about here. So Lotus Petal into Faithless Looting, follow it up with Reanimate, and we have a turn 1 Chancellor of the Annex. And for anybody interested in a fast combo deck, Black-Red Reanimator definitely should be on your list of decks to try out. It's plays like that that make it so attractive. And it looks like, yeah, now cycling Street Wraith. This is not great. And Gataxian Probe. And funny enough, now those probes are completely dead. So just discarding Prized Amalgam might get a massive advantage in this game here. So Gataxian Probe, usually a great way to accelerate your strategy, drawing into dredgers, or if you have your dredger, really accelerating the game plan. But yeah, this game is just a blowout now. This is not where you want to be, facing down a 5/6, unable to cast any spells. This is just about over here. And a Lotus Petal, of course, the Chancellor is not Thalia. It is not symmetrical. So he's just going to be able to play all of his spells totally unimpeded. I'm the only one that's going to have to pay that tax and will be completely unable to. And no bridges in the graveyard, so not really able to get much going here. Prized Amalgam will come back. And discarding. If it is not a dredger, it's hard to imagine any scenario. Oh, and it is a dredger, so I mean, we are hoping for Narcomoebas on this dredge. Oh, and it looks like Mike actually has some end of turn effects. That will need to happen before discard, and he's got an Entomb. So if he has a Reanimate effect in hand, this has got to be over. If he grabs Elish Norn, that will completely stop Narcomoebas and Icarids. Shrink that, and he does in fact have Elish Norn. A very one-sided game here. Mike's deck doing exactly what it's supposed to do. And of course we do have to still discard end of turn. Important to note, if your opponent does attempt to go to discard and you let them discard, it is now your turn. Of course, a judge's discretion might allow for a backup, but once you gain that information of what is in their hand, very difficult to make that argument, discarding the last part of the turn. And there is one more step toward lethal damage. Mike thinking this one over, if he wants to reanimate or not. And he's got 3 mana, and he's actually flashing back Faithless Looting here. Not sure what he would be looking for. Getting rid of Chrome Mox. And an Unmask. And here we go. Just really need a bunch of Narcomoebas and Bridge from Belows, and might still be able to pull this one out. Dread Return, Golgari Thug, Balustrade Spy, a Prized Amalgam, and Cabal Therapy. So that should do it. Was really Narcomoeba or bust there. Sending for 3, and will be dead on the crackback here. And we are off to game 3. So yeah, it does say something about the resiliency of Dredge, that if I did hit Narcomoeba and a few Bridge from Belows, that I actually would have been able to pull that one out. an unlikely scenario, but to have outs there when you're unable to play spells is kind of mind-blowing that this deck does exist and is part of the format. That even when you're unable to play spells, powerful effects can still go right for you. And here, of course, I will be on the draw, having lost game 2. No real changes to the sideboard there. Mindbreak Trap in the sideboard, really only useful versus Storm. Probably not actually worth the slot in the deck. Storm being a really minor part of the metagame, no matter how powerful it is. And Mindbreak Trap, rarely the trap condition being activated, even against some of the best combo decks. You could play several matches versus this Black-Red Reanimator lists without ever being able to cast your Mindbreak Trap. Of course, there are times where it would be activated, particularly when they're leading with artifact mana or if they have dark rituals. But that is a little bit too much trying to live in Christmas land. And it looks like Chancellor of the Annex again. So each of these games, Chancellor of the Annex proving to be very important. Game 1 buying plenty of time from Manaless Dredge. Game 2, Mike totally dominating the board and preventing any type of comeback. And we'll see what type of effect it has here Game 3. And it looks like it's actually going to go both ways here. All right. Can Mike do the same as last game and land a first turn Chancellor? It's going to be a lot harder having to pay 1 for his spell. And he is fetching. Of course, he can fearlessly fetch here. You got to expect a Badlands. I don't have any way of punishing mana bases at all. That is not part of the plan. And he does grab the Badlands, giving him access to black or red. The deck does run some basics, so it does not just get blown out by any of the non-basic land hate. And let's see where Mike goes with this. Does he fire a spell into Chancellor just to clear that out of there? And he's got Lotus Petal, so he can just pay the 1 here. And he's going to let it go. Does that mean that he's got a follow-up play? I feel like you pay the 1 there no matter what. Be able to go into his next turn with 2 mana. And even if he plans on entombing during my end step, he could have just done it with the Lotus Petal. But there we go. Entomb. And what is he going to get here? Elish Norn, a very strong contender. Shuts off all of the Bridge from Below tokens, as well as the Narcomoebas, Icarids, and Nether Shadows. The only way to win through an Elish Norn is going to be cobbling together some type of mess of prized amalgams. Very difficult to do. You'd have to hit 3 of your 4 prized amalgams, and then you'd have to hit a Dread Return, and then at that point, I guess best case scenario is either Flayer of the Hatebound or a Golgari Grave Troll. Flayer would do 4 damage on entering, die, come back, and do more damage. It actually would only do 2 damage the first time around, so really unimpressive. Golgari Grave Troll almost certainly part of a possible way to win through Elish Norn, but I mean that's just magical Christmas land for the most part. And we've got the Reanimate for Gristlebrand, so Gristlebrand may have felt like the safer play if he completely knew my list. Got to think Elish Norn is the clear choice, but here we go. Gristlebrand and passing at 11 life. And Dredging, looking good so far here, hitting Narcomoeba and a prized amalgam. So about as good a start as you can hope for there in terms of the first dredge. And we'll see if there's Street Wraith or Gitaxian Probes to go along with this. And looks like Balustrade Spy, Stinkweed Imp, and Icarid being discarded to Phantasmagorian and going to respond again. This time getting Cabal Therapy. Phantasmagorian going back in hand, and it looks like we may have a game here. So Prized Amalgam coming in. Still have that Chancellor trigger to clear. That can be done with Cabal Therapy pretty easily. Especially for value once there are Bridge from Below's in the graveyard. And Gristlebrand's lifelinking, allowing Mike to own the combat step here. And really taking a look at the graveyard. Being very conservative with his life total. Icarid's coming back with Golgari Thug. And leaving that Balustrade Spy in there. Dredging for 5. Another Icarid. And it looks like a Phantasmagorian and another Icarid. So lots of Icarid beats here are possible. Tough to say who is favored here. It feels like if Gristlebrand starts drawing cards, the discard step could be Mike's best friend. Could take a note out of Manaless Dredge's playbook and just get cards into the graveyard the old-fashioned way. And Cabal Therapy being fired off here just to clear that Chancellor trigger. So now future Cabal Therapies and Dread Returns should be able to resolve. And looks like a Narcomoeba in hand. That's the last place you want to see that card. Drawing Narcomoeba does feel pretty awful. And in this build, there's no real way to get value out of that situation. In the mana build, you can actually put Narcomoeba back on top of your library with Golgari Thug. That is an interaction that can be very important. Thug does have more text on him than just Dredge 4. And Mike gonna go ahead and swing again. Looks like one swing away. But that Narcomoeba gonna be more than willing to die for the cause and drag this game out a bit more. Or perhaps get sacrificed for a Dread Return. Let's see. A couple of important turns coming up here. So we have what looks like an end step returning of Phantasmagorian to hand. And then during the upkeep, we've got multiple Icarids here. And thinking through exactly which cards are going to get exiled for Icarid. This is not going to be lethal damage. A whole lot of Icarids here. So 13 damage could come in. We'll see what this Stinkweed Imp brings to the yard. Hoping for Narcomoebas. And there's one. And the Dread Return. And the Balustrade Spy. So that might do it right there. Let's see here. If this 13 gets in, then Mike will be unable to draw 7 cards. Cabal Therapy could give us perfect information if we find one. So Mike unable to draw in response with Gristlebrand now. This may be one of those rare situations where Gristlebrand is simply not enough. And there's Cabal Therapy. So this is looking like it's gonna be it right here. Just some Exhumes and that Elesh Norn in hand. And now Dread Return. So we're going to get to see the full combo here, it looks like. Dread Return goes. And we're going to need 2 more Dread Returns to just end this right here and now. So getting Narcomoeba. And we've got Dread Return for Flayer of the Hatebound. So those 3 Narcomoebas go into the graveyard. That's going to generate 12 zombie tokens. But those are not going to matter here. Going through the motions. Flamekin's going to do 4 damage. And can actually just Cabal Therapy away the Flayer of the Hatebound, as he does have Undying and would just come back. So life total low enough that could just do 4 and then 5. And we'll see either one of those paths lead to victory here. Checking to see if there is another Dread Return. There should be, and it is. And just going to sacrifice 3 zombies. Dread Return, Golgari, Grave Troll, and there's another 30 or 40 damage to the face. So that's going to do it. So Gristlebrand, not enough there. Really needed to be Elesh Norn in order to have a chance at victory, as the inevitability of Manaless Dredge finally gets there in the end. All right, well, that is the end of round 1. We're going to have a bunch of different decks on camera this week. A little bit of a new setup here with the audio and video as well. So I'd love to hear any feedback on all of the elements of this production here. Really trying to refine it and make it the best that I can with the resources available. So this has been ELD with Brainstorm MTG. Thanks for watching.